So it's really... So what I'm trying to do is make sort of an MC Escher-inspired tabletop game using kind of some inspiration from Monument Valley, and I'm also looking at some card games that were released in Japan called the Rocca line of games. That's ROCCA, and you can see games like Rocca Rails or 2 Rocca. And what they did was this cool thing where they made these hex cards for pretty much all their games, and you just use isometric grids to create these illusions of 3D space to make like train games and dungeon games and things like that. So I'm trying to do something sort of different besides that, because what they ended up doing was taking a hex card like this, and you would take another hex card and you would overlap it so that the rhombuses, like one third of the card, would be covered up by the card that you're putting down. So you kind of create these sort of 3-dimensional paths with overlapping cards. What I want to do is more of a traditional hex grid, where you can like put the cards together flush in a hex grid and create a path sort of like this. This is what I put together in really quick in the morning, and just kind of, because I woke up with this like very loose like line building game that that would work, and so I just really quickly whipped up this loose concept. In hindsight, it doesn't really make sense that you'd want to be trying to make like different colored paths. You would more likely be wanting to make paths that are the same color, and then you can traverse those paths with your pawn, or any pawn, I suppose. I mean, that's the thing. I'm just kind of making this up as I go. This is usually what I do. I kind of come up with like a toy first, and then once I've got that toy kind of like worked out, like what are the rules of that toy? What is this toy going to do all the time? What can it not do? Then I can kind of take the basics of the component, that toy, and make rules around it. Now that I guess I kind of repeated myself there. In short, basically, I just take a component and then examine its physicality, and then figure out, all right, how can I make a game out of this that is going to actually be interesting? Sometimes the challenge is simply just figuring out the actual, like, it seems silly, but just figuring out how to put things together. It's a really simple question, but gosh, it's tough. The big issue I have right now is that a lot of times when I'm rotating these, when I'm setting up the lines manually, they don't line up properly, and so you get these kind of mismatched things. Which may still happen in final production if this ever were to go to production. That's way off. But registration is always an issue when you're doing any kind of print run. You want things to line up exactly right, but just the way that the machine cuts the cardstock can cause some shifts. And what I want to do is to minimize as much as I can on my end those variables. So my thought is I can take a 3x3 grid like this, and I think I can set this up so that I have all of the possible permutations of the path. So if you imagine that each face of this isometric cube is really just a 3x3 grid, that and each cell in that grid may be one of 4 colors, either gray, white, pink, or blue. And those are just placeholder colors right now, but in those 4 states on 3 cells, I essentially create one third of a hex card. And if I can rotate that 3 times, following the rule, the rules being that I can connect the paths, by color within a single card, then I can probably make something that's a reasonable prototype, and then from there I can print it out, cut it out, and actually get to do some playtesting. And yeah, oh hey, hey Seth. Yes, so I think definitely, like ownership of paths may be an element in this game quite a bit, probably. Certainly the colors are going to matter. I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can take this. If each face had its own like, sort of terrain, I mean, I'm just using placeholder words right now, but if a face had a particular terrain, that could matter. Gosh, there's so many ways you could go with this, and then on top of all that, it's the brain burning aspect of rotating these tiles. And what are the rules about rotating? Can you rotate a tile that's already surrounded? I mean, the physicality of the hex card is such that it would be tough to actually like stick your fingers in and, for example, rotate this this one if it was completely surrounded by like 5 tiles. So maybe the rule is that if it's surrounded by 5 tiles, like if you can't actually like physically slide a tile out of the grid, then you can't rotate it. But otherwise, the ones that are out in the perimeter here, they're perfectly fine. Partly because you can actually grab them. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Oh, Michael, hey. Yes, the different paths could certainly be like resources. What I was actually thinking about was making this. I was imagining this as sort of a pick up and deliver, maybe. I like the idea of Monument Valley. I love that you're trying to get from point A to point B, but in a tabletop game with multiple players, you really want overlapping objectives that everyone's kind of getting in each other's way and bumping into each other. And so I like the idea of doing something like Great Heartland Hauling Company did with giving each card a preset number of cubes or resources that, and you're going from card to card in Heartland Hauling. There's no like pathing unless you play the advanced mode, which has barriers. But in this case, I kind of like the idea that you're traversing this like non-Euclidean. I guess it is Euclidean, but sort of really brain-burning, odd geometric landscape. And part of the challenge isn't just getting from point A to point B, but making point A and point B exist properly, which I guess kind of gets into acroteria a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of places you can go. So anyway, right now all I'm doing in the layout is I've got this 3x3 grid, and I'm going to take it into InDesign so that I can. Whoops. First things first, actually, I took this 3x3 grid and merged it into a single object, which, how can I show you that? Yeah, so right here, the compound path, I just made a compound path. So this is actually all one shape, so if I were to, like, change the color, it affects the entire thing. And I've fortunately got the dimensions of a previous rhombus that I made pretty well locked in. This is working out just fine to make a hex. So I am first going 30-degree rotation, 30-degree slant. And this looks like it would work out, except that I found that if I don't adjust things just right and tile them just properly, it does not make a proper hex. So I have to just instead of having to do it all again, I just copy paste the work I've already done. It's just easier that way. The reason I merged this into a compound path first, instead of just like grouping them as separate objects, I tried that before, and it for some reason just like skewed the dimensions in a weird way, so it didn't create a rhombus at all. But in this case, because it's a compound path, all of the dimensions I'm changing here are keeping it relatively the same as this rhombus that I know works. But I don't want this to be a compound path anymore at this point, because I want to change the individual colors of each of these cells. So my thought is I can take this, I'll copy it, bring it over to Illustrator from InDesign. I probably could have done this all in Illustrator, the rotation and all that stuff, but I find the Pathfinder tool in Illustrator to be a little bit hinky. It's very odd, I don't know. So I'm going to ungroup this whole thing, and now it's back to being 9 individual squares. And when I bring this back from Illustrator back into InDesign, is it still a compound path? It sure is. I don't want that to be a compound path. It's still a compound path. Ah, poop. How can I do this? Oh, well, I mean, I suppose I could just take one rhombus and just tile that rhombus. And they're exactly 2 inches by 2 inches. Or not 2 inches by 2 inches, but 2 inches by 2 and some change. I'm sure doing this manually is not ideal. Someone's gonna yell at me for doing it this way, but you know, it's a prototype, so I'm just gonna do whatever's fastest for now. Seth, I think you mean platonic solids, no? Or am I misremembering geometry class? As I recall, cube, octahedron was an 8-sided die. I'm misremembering now. Just right. I'm sure there's some oddness here that I'm missing. Yeah, sure is. I can already tell there's some slight misalignment. For real? I can't get it any more detailed than that? Okay, that's good. How's that other edge looking? Yeah, that's a little weird too. Just right. Okay, so all that work just to make a 3x3 rhombus. I'm gonna group that, and didn't mean to flip it like that. Now I gotta remember what the actual proper dimensions were. So the rhombus that I've got here is from another game that. Co-designer and I are working on a tile laying game that uses rhombuses to create another isometric grid sort of idea. All right, so it's 2 inches. That is 2.3094. Hopefully this works. Cross your fingers. Again, that's so bizarre. I don't know why it's doing that. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Well, if I can just do my best here, I'll just line up these objects. I just have to, again, do it manually, which is less than optimal, but if it means I'll get an accurate shape. All right. Whatevs, that works. Okay, sweet. Now the reason I made these, yeah, Escher-inspired salads would probably be accurate. Is it Euclid? Am I totally misremembering? I remember from my D&D days, like the solids being called platonic for some reason. So this is what I mean, like. And those are white. Okay. So now by doing this, I'm pretty sure I'll have a perfectly shaped path, sort of, maybe. That's the idea. Let's get this baby centered. Huh, okay. Well, that's bothersome. I don't know why the path is too tall. Oh gosh. I know some math friends are just like yelling at me right now, telling me how obvious this all is. Because if I spin this around, yeah, it's not working. Is it just a matter of just reducing the height? It just seems so odd because the angles are working. Oh, math. Okay. Here's what I can do. All right. This is back in Illustrator here. I'm just going to make a 3x3 grid. Bump it right up against each other. Actually, you know what? I should do this in Illustrator in InDesign first, since I can actually do a grid properly there. So 1 by 1. Step and repeat. Create as grid. Doing 3 rows, 3 columns, putting them 1 inch apart from each other since these are 1 inch squares. Boom. Proper grid. Copy paste that grid, bring it to oops. Bring it to Illustrator. Cool, it's still separate. All right. Then what else? The problem is if I rotate this as, even if it's grouped together, if I rotate that group, oh gosh, where is it? I was just doing this yesterday. There we go. If I rotate this group, okay, so it's still transforming as a group. That's good. All right, so I've made an isometric face there. Ah, it was 45, 35, 30. Okay. Well, good to know. So I'm just going to copy paste this back into InDesign. The issue with the way Illustrator has been making my isometric faces is that it's got an odd angle sometimes. I'm not sure what the deal is. It seems to have worked out okay on this edge, but if you look at it on this edge, this is touching the guideline, but as you get further and further and further up, you see some drift, and that top corner for some reason is drifting by like a fraction of a degree. I don't know why it does that. Fortunately, I've got this So if it's maybe 0.25 degrees. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's a little too far. So even shorter than that, 1/8 of a degree. Let's take a closer look. Okay, so that edge is touching the guideline. This edge still drifts, so if I take it a little bit farther, maybe 1.5. So that is touching the guideline. Oh, it's so close. 1.55 maybe. It's super, super finicky here. I know it's not exactly the most entertaining thing to watch on a stream. So 1.58 might be the key. The rule of thumb is always go double or half, and I'm probably going too finicky here, but it seems to have worked out, and as close as I can look, as close as I can zoom in, it seems to be working out okay. All right, so let's call that one face. Oh, come on, what is this? Oh, it's a graphic frame? Yeah, gotta select all the individual polygons, move it outside of the graphic frame. Don't need that rectangle. There, okay, now we've got 9 individual shapes. So that, oh yay. I think it's working. If we remove the stroke, one of the most aggravating things I've found in Adobe products, and something that I still kind of hold a grudge about since I switched from way back in the day using Macromedia Freehand. Like no one remembers Macromedia Freehand anymore, but in Macromedia Freehand, strokes were not considered part of the object in terms of assessing your dimensions. So if you had like a 1 inch by 1 inch square, it was just a 1 inch by 1 inch square, regardless of whether you had like a 5-point stroke around it. However, in InDesign and Illustrator, if you have a stroke around it, like a 3-point stroke, that is considered part of the object and will be factored into the dimensions of the thing. So yeah, if you're trying to align certain objects and you don't want to worry about the stroke, like if you don't just like in your head consider that, you may get to some misalignment issues. I'm gonna take off this drop shadow, make sure that I've got everything properly set up here. I think I might be a little off. Just want to make sure that this face is right. I'm being really, really finicky about this because the geometry is such that if I have 1 degree of variance or drift, then the entire tile is probably not going to work. Aha, oh, that's the issue. face is off. Oh, good to know. Yeah. Yeah. Think that'll work out. Cool beans. All right. So I can remove that face and get to work on making some actual paths that are going to line up with each other. And honestly, a 3x3 grid is probably going to make like really oddly thick paths, but for now it's, you know, prototype, just get it on the table as fast as possible. It looks like I've made a Rubik's Cube actually. Easiest Rubik's Cube in the world, just it's all black squares. Sith cube. All right. Okay. Ooh, oops. Can see that chair there. Okay. So looking at the quick prototype I made before, so it looks like some basic paths. If I want to do this one, for example, you have basic face would be something like this. You've got, you know, I should make some rules too. Let's say that pink is always the highest layer, blue is the second highest layer, and black, the gray, is the lowest layer. Thematically, I may make the art a little bit different, like call it river, or maybe tunnels, rivers, and paths, like roads, so that there's an implied layering effect there. I'm not sure how to depict tunnels on the art, but regardless, whatever that ends up being, those may be the rules. So let's just say pink is always on top, and say there's a blue here, and then these are white. And if I do a multiply effect, then I can still see the shadow of the underlying hex cube there. And as a matter of fact, I can go ahead and just add the stroke back in there, so it's a little bit clearer. But I want to make that an inner stroke so I don't mess up the dimensions. Okay, so that's one face, and what I'd like to do is set up these tiles. I'm setting up these individual assets so that I can have, I can make a spreadsheet that will do, that will toggle in the three faces on the tile, so the top and the left and the right, and I can just drop in one face or another, because so without having to do like, I don't have to make every permutation of three possible faces when I can just as easily make the different permutations of one face and just rotate or toggle in a different face that just happens to have the pinks lined up, for example. So just to be clear about that, say that this was one face, and I'm going to make a new document to keep track of all these 0.52 and 2.6, whoop, 2.6321. No margin, no bleed, no facing pages, no primary text frame. This is a document that's exactly the dimensions of this thing. So make a new page, and I'm just gonna honestly just kind of brute force this. And make that black. I should make a new tint swatch so that this is all consistent. So 20% black for that gray. And I suppose there would have to be a version of this that has pink on top and then gray. So those are all the permutations of a cross face, right? Yeah, okay. So now I'm ready to make a new face, which would probably be something, so for example, oops, I should close that. If it were a face more like this, sort of a straight line. Oh, yes. Okay, so there may be faces where only 4 sections connect to the edge. That is an important thing to figure out and how to do that. Okay, well, first off, the simplest one is probably this face, this like one angle face. That is something I can easily do, I think. Didn't mean to drift that. Okay. So I'll just make 3 of those. And I suppose I should make the inverse of that, because if you rotate this, right, so if you mirror it horizontally, it's essentially a different shape. Okay. So I'm just duplicating the last 3 pages that I did. Let's do this in one big bulk thing. Select this middle square, make it white again. Then select the left square. Not sure if any of this is interesting to watch, but it keeps me on task, I suppose. My thing, the reason I'm streaming partly is because I'm at a standing desk, and a lot of times I just kind of like lose focus and I get distracted by something else. I like it working at a standing desk just because I hate sitting all day, but makes it hard to focus. Yeah, you can snap to a guide, Seth. You can rotate it for sure, but I think for now I've got this kind of settled into something that that works for me. Probably what I'll do when this gets into, if this gets picked up by a publisher, for example, I'll kind of talk to their art director or the layout person, maybe their artist even, and kind of talk to them about how I set up this prototype, and they're probably going to have a way smarter way of doing this than I did, and it's just I'm probably doing everything the hard way here. But I like being able to share the prototype files that I've made for my kinky little sketches, so that they can at least have some idea of what I was going for. I did this with Kiki, actually. Kiki was a tricky one by gum, because the art and the game design are directly related. Like where you put the icons on those cards physically matters, because it can disallow or allow a card to be grown from another surface on that card. It is the most organic like production experience. Sorry, Seth, it may be me. Sorry, Seth. Alright, so I've got that basic angle face. Now I'm looking at the, I don't know, what do you call this? I should save this document while I'm at it. Just call them faces. So there are versions of these crosses that would not be intersections, but rather, I don't know what you call them, splits? Well, basically you'd have this sort of situation. So the path comes from one edge and then traverses around the corner, just hugging the corner of that edge, and then it will extend off. I find that perhaps a little bit clearer to understand. Hopefully, yeah, maybe. I don't know what I'm doing. I really have no idea what I'm doing here. Oh, and you know what? I should also, oh geez, there are so many permutations with this. Oh my God, I can't believe it's just, every single little face I do is just exponentially increasing the number of possible orientations and cubes that I could do. So for example, because these are rhombuses, they're not radially symmetrical, which means that just because I have this cross with a horizontal blue and a vertical pink doesn't necessarily mean, I think, that I can rotate this in such a way, or that the player, I should say, could rotate it in such a way that they can have a horizontal pink. I don't think so. Let's see. Okay, no, well, that sort of works, right? I mean, just assume that. Oh man, math. Bane. Like, do I need to double this up? Do I need to have a face that has a pink horizontal and a blue vertical? You know, it's a prototype for now. If I'm missing that particular permutation, then so be it. It would be nice to have the flip sides here, though. Pink top, blue bottom. Blue top. Okay. And I suppose that would be easy enough to do here, right? No, it's still pink. Okay. Oop. So that's 15 faces. Pretty good. So that last face covers this possibility. I've got crosses over here. I've got angles over here. I've got the like facing angles settle down. What am I missing? And that can't possibly be all the permutations, right? I'm certainly missing something. You know what? Since if I'm gonna go this few, I'm gonna as well just go ahead and make the other. Thanks for watching, Seth. Thanks for subscribing. Alright. I don't know if anybody's watching now, so I'm just gonna kind of keep quiet and just get back to work here. Alright, so I've made... I said I was gonna be quiet, but now I'm talking again. I've made all these faces. I kind of just want to play around a little bit because I've got 18 faces here. That's a pretty good number, right? So let's see what we can do. So if I'm saving these faces and I'm going to save them, what are called support. No bleed. Saving the, I'm exporting this InDesign file that I've got with all these individual faces as an EPS, which will mean that it turns all of the pages into EPSs. So now I've got these individual EPS files. And EPS is great just because it's vector, so I can scale it to whatever dimensions I need, and it won't ever lose its resolution. All right, now let's see what we can do to play around with this a little bit. Okay. So, this is my blank canvas here. This is the cube, so to speak. Got it lined up there. Okay, good. Let's see if this works. I'm a little nervous. Let's drop in one face here. And if I align it to the left and align it to the bottom, it lines up! Yay! Okay. If I set that to multiply, then I can see the thing behind it. Oh, perfect. Yes. Okay. All right. This is working. We're fine. It's gonna work. Now there is one thing though, because I would like every color to appear on each tile, so probably could not do something like this. So so here's another issue. I can't align to the top since technically the top of this object is actually at this corner, not what I would consider the visible top. Let me set the performance display a little bit higher so I can actually see what's going on here. Going as few increments as possible, and that looks perfectly lined up. Yes, okay. Now, when a path traverses the corner of a cube, I don't want the color to change. So this face is not correct. I need something that touches pink edge here. So like this might work. Well, not quite. Oh, do I need... Oh my god, I need corners for every edge, don't I? Oh, golly. Well, let's see if there's a fast way I can do this.